Okay. The Lord's helped my voice to hold out in a substandard, it's very above standard of what I thought it might be. The Lord does listen, and I'm thankful. All right, I'm going to say a few words about AMI, and then we'll open the floor for questions about whatever you want to ask. If it's something I don't feel I can answer very well, I'll just tell you. But let me say a little bit about what I'm getting ready to do. We are in the process of finalizing the acquisition of 78 acres property, very close to Andrews University. I mean, my church tried 3 or 4 times to buy property for a nature school and just never worked. And then this happens, and I don't think I should go into all the details right now, but I will tell you that the Lord gave it to us we have to buy it, but he gave it to us on terms that were exactly what we wanted without having to ask for it. So the owner is as excited about us getting the property as I think we are about getting it ourselves. And at first, when Dan Bakioki called him, he said, I don't even know if I want to sell it. He didn't want a hotel or a truck stop or anything else going in on it. It is close to a major 4-lane road. But he is just so excited about it, and we're so excited about it. We are, it's a big undertaking, but I think as Adventists, we've kind of not done, what was that quote, Colleen, by A.W. Tozer? It's too bad to only attempt things we can do in our human power and not give God a chance to do the things only he can do. It's by A.W. Tozer, who was a pastor in Chicago. I didn't say it as good as it was quoted, but I believe what's really hurt the Adventist church is asking too little of our members. And Christian Service, page 72, I think it is, Ellen White says the pastor's job is to put everybody to work. And I took that to heart. So I started creating places for people to do something for God, and guess what? They fell more in love with God while they were doing it. And AMI will be no different. Our first building will be a media center, administration center, and IT center. We're going to set up a tent in the better times of the year when we can have a big old tent, like a camp meeting at times. At least this is my hope. And we'll start using the property right away. What will happen, I hope, is I've had a good relationship with the president of the university. And it's my hope that one of the doctors that's going to be working with us, who has a good relationship with the university, that we can fulfill the prophecy Ellen White talked about. She said in the due course of time, a sanitarium was to be built in Berrien Springs, not to compete with any other sanitariums, but for the training of the students. Now, our young people are being picked off left and right by illustrious careers that leave the church looking like it's been run over and kicked to the side of the road. And what I really think, if we want to keep them and take them to heaven, we're going to have to give them a chance to be the hands and the heart and the voice and the feet of God. So that sanitarium we're going to build will be particularly a training institution. If it works out how we think, it'll work as a complement to the primary care facility that the village church purchased and is remodeling. And then we will be building a convention center, an event center on it. We'll be building a K-8 school that has a bunch of cabins for individualized learning, or I should say individualized classroom learning. And then we'll be doing an academy of the same similar nature. We'll have a farm on it. And we'll build the medical missionary work right there too. Now, personally, I'd love to work together on these kind of things like Lee and I worked in Montana on the Poplar Church. And being at the Poplar Church on the east side of Montana, I was convinced it's time for groups to start going back there. And AMI will coordinate those kind of groups, Advent Mission Institute. Our website is ami365.org. And I really believe we need a renaissance of joy through Adventist mission work. I can see the picture up here on the back screen is the picture of our property. If you go to our website, you'll get a kind of a animation of all the buildings. We do have a doctor that has pledged to buy 38 acres for us next to our 78, so we'll have 116 acres. And I'm thankful for what everyone can do, but I'm hoping no matter what a person's trade or interest is, that they'll consider coming and being part of what I consider the joy of Adventist fellowship while we work for God. So I think that what I learned at Cicero and what I learned at Village, now God wants me to teach. I'm going to be teaching an Institute of Church Renewal. You know, there's spiritual laws and there's leadership laws. And if you don't understand them, you can't renew a church. Plan to teach homiletics and leadership along with a variety of other classes, but of course the medical missionary work will be led by one of our preeminent physicians in that realm as long as we get everything worked out, but it's looking like it. How fast are we going to go? We're going to go as fast as, really, to be honest, the money comes in, because Dan Bakioki has a team of people. He has a team of probably 5 renderers and architects. He's already working on the plans for the media center. And my sense is that God provided for a quick build-up at Village, and I think he's going to provide for a quick build-up here. Yeah, Jesus is coming. Ellen White was asked about that once. She said, she was asked, why are you spending all this money on the institutions? And she said, you know, publishing, medical, and education. She said, basically, these things need to go forward. And she said, think about not doing so much for yourself, as my loose paraphrase, and start putting it into the work. So we've been saying Jesus is coming for the last 150 years. It's true. Every generation gets reminders. Right now, we have a lot of them. But we can't stop and wring our hands. We're supposed to just go forward best we can, because it's by doing that we're transformed. So we're going forward with AMI, and as God moves on people's hearts, I believe it can become a renaissance for not only the North American division, but for the world church. And I'll say one more thing. Adventism has kind of drifted into the arms of the world, and it can't have spiritual vitality while it's doing that. Now, that's way too glaring. It's person by person and congregation by congregation. But wherever Adventism recommits to work with God, God comes into a committed work relationship with them, and things start to happen. I've never been let down by God. I've tried to pray my way with my elders and board and church into God's leading, and at this point in time, I'm absolutely convinced, because I didn't really want to do AMI, to be very honest. It would have been much easier for me to take a job in the denomination, of which I was offered some. And it would have relieved me of a bit of the stigmata that is on me in the minds of some, because it's not easy to get fired in the Adventist church. So when you get fired, everybody thinks you did something. I did do something. I had some challenging interactions with the organization regarding some challenging situations that were both local and in the world church. And those got difficult, and without saying too much. So that's AMI. Very good. Thank you for listening and let me talk about it. I think maybe towards the end there'll be a way if you want to financially partner with me. That'd be great. My wife has business cards. You want to wave your hand over there so they can see who you are? That's my wife, Colleen. She's a 4th grade teacher, my partner in ministry. All right, I think this is a question and answer session, so I'm going to turn it over to our roving Soren. Looks like he's got a mic. I don't know if anyone else does. I'll try to answer your questions best I can. I'm not an expert on much, but I can tell you from my perspective what I think on whatever you ask. All right, question right here.
I regularly get sent requests from PUC where I went to school about all the stuff they want from me, but they've gone so far away from where I am philosophically, religiously, it's hard to support that. What is your perspective on the existing Adventist schools and how, at least to some, they're moving more to the left, and how should we interact with them?
Well, is it Ralph Trecarton who's the president there? Right, at PUC? Yeah, Ralph Trecarton has a picture of me in his office. The picture that was put up when I got fired of me standing before the court, Ralph Jacartin has that picture hanging in his office. Ralph is trying to bring that institution back. The problem with a college is that it attracts and needs men and women of higher education, but they forget that the gospel is simple. So what I would say to you is I would encourage you to reach out to him directly and see if there's anything you can do to help him, because I'll tell you what helps a leader: prayers, encouragement, and money. And if you don't have money, your willingness to do something. I know Maranatha came onto the campus of Andrews and is helping renovate Lamson Hall, the girls' dormitory. So I know Ralph personally. He is a personal friend of my wife. Their families grew up together in Maine. And I believe he's trying to bring it back to its roots. But you Westerners, and I don't know if you're a native Westerner or not, are very independent-minded people, which is good. And in some places, it seems so independent-minded that the Bible and the spirit of prophecy no longer get to have the last word. Now, it sounds like you believe in that still. I would do a lot of thinking about where I sent my child to school. You look like you're a young man still, yeah. Got a few years before you're off to college. Here's the challenge. There are some people in our institutions that don't really believe what Adventism believes. Trying to fix that is very difficult, but it should be done. And really, right now inside of Adventism, there's a sense that Ellen White is not an inspired commentator on the Bible. She's just one of many other commentators. So it's really a bit of a war on against what we have historically believed to be her prophetic role. Some of the independent colleges are certified, accredited, but they're doing a really good work. Training your son, and if you have other children, how to stand for what they believe is important, because no matter where he goes, even if he goes to one that's a lot closer to the blueprint, there's always going to be influences there. So you have a follow-up, or did I get close enough on that for you? Or here, listen, I need everybody to understand where I'm at. I feel like I got run over by the institution. I love the institution. Sometimes I think I'm maybe looking through too rose-colored glasses of it. But I still hope and pray our institutions can come back to their original mandate and train our men and women to grow up to be missionaries that go out into the workplace or the mission field, and they're not different in some sense, and they transform the world. So when I went to Andrews University 40 years ago, we had a professor even then that was kind of going off and saying and doing his own thing. I still remember this one young woman who was in a Bible class with me, and she stood up and confronted him. She didn't get out of her seat, but she did confront him, and she was nice about it. She was right, and he was wrong. And we're going to have to raise young people like that. So I encourage you as a dad, spend time with your boy, your kids, teach them how to walk with God, teach them how to think for themselves. That's the problem right now. Everybody wants an expert to tell them what to think. So, all right, someone else? See one in the back over here.
What was your final counsel to the young man who called you about conflict with marrying a young woman and the parents being in conflict?
Well, my counsel to him in the beginning was to be humble and to show proper honor to everybody, but to follow his prayed-over convictions in dialogue. And when he called back, I don't think I could have been more proud that I think he did it. Now, how did it end up? The only thing I know about how it's ended up is that he grew. And what will be the end product, I don't know, but I do know this. If as a parent you're not self-aware and you don't draw proper boundaries about where your influence needs to be minimizing over time, if you can't be objective, in that situation, the two parents didn't appreciate each other. Well, come on, let's let the grown-ups be grown-ups. They need to get together and talk so they're not compromising the next generation's dialogue. And if the next generation's not supposed to court, bond, and marry, then they need a unified front. But the kids shouldn't have to be sorting through the absence of Christian maturity in the lives of their parents. But it happens. It happens. My mother didn't lead me to Christ except to force me into that church school. And so there are times when the kids have to say respectfully to the parents, I respect you, I've tried to honor you, but I don't feel as a young adult now you're correspondingly being honest with yourself about how this stress up above us and the generation above me is affecting your objectivity here. I mean, how would you feel if you had to be linked forever through marriage to people you didn't even like? And, I think that my sermon title was How to Endure a Bad Marriage Till Death Do Us Part. There's nothing about that I'm planning to ever live out in my life, and nobody here should, although, some people have to. So in the end, he grew. When he called me back a couple months later, it's like, I'm really proud of you. He was respectful to his parents, but he still communicated his own sense of Christian manhood. And I don't know what else he could do. All right, any follow-ups on that? Yeah, mom and dad don't get to pick. I do believe in arranged marriages, but it's not through the parents. It's with the parents. God is the arranger. And if we can teach our kids to not make their courtship fiancé the idol of their life. But there's nothing more intoxicating than love, especially infatuation, which is a form of love. It's actually a God-ordained emotional high to make it through the pitfalls of learning about each other. But it can't last forever, although it should never be completely gone from the marriage. So, 3 things to make a good relationship work: trust, respect, and affection. And a lot of people have those 3 in place until they get married. And then they don't solve their problems and the affection starts draining out. And many a wife will stay with a man who's kind of a big, I want to choose my words carefully, but he's kind of a big boy for about 20 years. And then when the kids are grown up, they say, "C'est la vie," goodbye. And what I've found in my ministry is that when they get that far, it's over. There is no recovery. It's partially the wife's fault because she should have spoke up and been saying, "Hey, you shouldn't be treating me like that," or the kids. And it's a big part of the man's fault. But if you're married to somebody and you don't have enough internal fortitude to tell him, "You're treating me the wrong way," then he's just going to keep getting worse at what he's good at. And that's how you get to those situations. I wish I had no experience with them. I'm not a social worker by profession, but I'm a social worker by profession. And the good news is my counsel from the Bible is inspired. We're not guessing on peer-reviewed science. And if people are willing, they can rebuild. But I do want to remind people, if you're on the wrong train, I still have these 2 friends. They were in Africa on a mission trip, and they thought they'd hop a train. The problem is they hopped on the train, and it kept picking up speed. Eventually, when it was going probably 35 miles an hour, they jumped off. Fortunately, they didn't fly into a telephone pole or a concrete abutment or something like that. But the problem with being on the wrong train is it keeps picking up speed. So it's super important what happens in courtship. I personally think the young man was getting the practice he was going to need for his future wife, whether it was her or someone else. And hopefully she was getting it too. So, all right, any other questions? Yep, right here.
Thank you. I've been in 2 different churches and had two incidences in one church and another incident in another church. One was at the table during an evangelistic series, Bible study, when we had guests that were at the table. Another time was hearing it from the pulpit, and the other time was over fellowship meal after church. And what it is it's politics. And,
Politics?
Yes.
Okay.
And I've had to turn to someone. I turned to someone in the fellowship hall, this is years ago, and I had to say, excuse me, there may be guests in the room and we don't know their affiliation. Could you please not talk about this? Another time, I heard it from the pulpit and I got into a bunch of trouble because I left the room and stood at the back and just went like this because I did not want to hear any more from the pulpit, and I was called on the carpet for that. And another time, somebody called me. She didn't directly call me, but I don't know. Anyway, I don't know how to handle it. I tried to handle it myself, and it doesn't work. So, do I go to the pastor? And if I don't get it through the pastor, then where do you go? So that people aren't talking politics. And I'm not talking about Daniel and Revelation and the papacy and stuff like that. I'm talking the politics from the pulpit.
Okay, good question. I do want to encourage everybody, as much as this part of the world may be typically very right-leaning, conservative politically, that you bring up an exceptional point. So I'd like to kind of divide it into two subjects. In the early days of Adventism, most of the Adventist posture on abolition was completely Republican. James White would go so far as to say that everybody needed to vote for Abraham Lincoln. That doesn't make it right that he said that, but abolition was a Republican platform in the 1860s. So the difference between running down Joe Biden or Donald Trump is a little different than the subject matter, which has its own political attachments. So Ellen White would go so far as to say, if you did not believe in abolition, there was no place for you. You didn't really deserve to be enrolled on the books of the remnant church. So I just want to make sure that we don't moralize as wrong all cultural discussions because one half of the political spectrum is aligned with maybe how we're thinking. But Ellen White will talk about avoiding not the moral issues that are in society that may be left or right, but she will talk about getting in the way of the gospel by just dealing in the raw politics of person and party. So I think it's party politics that we are to avoid. If you voted for this person or that person, that's your business. It's not a very good idea, typically, to delve into that, especially if you're not with friends, where it seems like a reasonable discussion, because there may be somebody there who stumbles over your party politics. But when the last 5 years we went through, we did see political alignment around some of the subjects that were in the culture. So for instance, mandates. Not the vaccine, although the vaccine was mandated. Mandates did end up having a more robust opposition inside the Republican Party. They were against them. Whereas the Democratic Party was pushing that if you love your neighbor, you need to do this. So I think it is important that we don't hang our hopes on any human politicians. They're going to all disappoint us. It doesn't matter what side they're on. The problem is we're watching the value system of America do this so terribly that when it gets way over here, we'd like it to get here, but we may pick way over here. And recently I was somewhere else and I walked by a door on a room and it said no kings. And I didn't even know what it was talking about until I got to where I could watch the news. And no kings. And so I don't even want to go into it, but I will say this. The top that used to spin is wobbling. When it falls over, I don't know, but we don't want to make party politics at the center of anything we're doing. But we cannot avoid the discussions that impinge, in this case, on religious liberty. That's my belief. religious liberty for the African American 150 years ago was abolition. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church landed squarely on the side of abolition. Was it political? You could make a case it was, but it wasn't party politics. It was morality that was aligning. If it aligned, great. Some people got mad at us in Village. They voted into the Constitution of the Michigan State Legislature a law enshrining the protection of an abortion. The doctor that was on my staff at that point in time got up and made a video about it, and boy, some people came unglued over it. The Bible says Christians defend the defenseless. I don't know anybody more defenseless than a baby in the womb. I don't want to oversimplify the complicating dynamics that come occasionally, but those are the exceptions, not the rule. And unfortunately, a lot of our people are ignorant about our history in regards to where we aligned on moral issues in society. Abolition, prohibition was another one. Ellen White would say, if the vote for prohibition happens on Sabbath, go vote. Prohibition kind of went down in a bad way. It created a bunch of backlash. People were bootlegging. But our pioneers were never afraid of taking on a moral issue inside of society, no matter who it aligned with. Let's avoid party politics, because those people are going to disappoint us. And let's deal with morality. And I found the greatest way for people to shoot at me or others is to say I'm being political. It's like, well, I'm sorry, you don't know our Adventist history very well. Now, it sounds like you tried to be discreet in how you handle it. That's good. And I affirm that very much. So on party politics, let's leave it out of church. Let's leave it out of most of our conversations. On moral issues inside our culture, even though they're aligned left to right, the church is to help calibrate the collective conscience. Does that make sense? All right, great. All right, any other questions? I see one here.
Thank you. I'm beginning Rob Bell. You may have heard of him.
Yeah.
He wrote a book and kind of concluded in our world that everything is spiritual.
Yeah.
I kind of get to thinking about that. John Eldredge writes, the battle is over our heart.
Yeah.
A war between good and evil. Sorry, thank you. God and Satan. My voice is not what I'd like it to be. I'm sorry.
We identified this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. So if our battle is not, the Lord, the battle is the Lord's. Our Bible teaches, but if the battle's over our heart, everything is spiritual, is it not?
Yeah.
So all these political things, I have to ask myself, where is God in it? What is he trying to teach me through it?
Right.
What can I learn? Why is this happening to me at this point in time? Because in the end, the battle is the Lord's, and I don't know.
No, I don't disagree. There is a warfare going on behind the scenes that we don't think about too much, but that's what Paul told us.
One more thought. I kind of, in my own journey with my wife, getting to meet her, I learned to love the wrong person about 4 or 5 times before I met her. The wrong person is anyone who doesn't love God more than me.
Well, that's a starting point for sure.
And for me, that was very hard to determine. So if it's possible for me to learn to love the wrong person, what do you think about the idea? Could I learn to love the wrong God?
I think it's as natural as falling out of bed. Personally, I think we were made to give our lives away for something. For some people, it's, I don't know, in Idaho, do you have a sports team? Maybe you're lucky enough to be small enough to not have one. For some people, it's NASCAR. For some, it's their portfolio. For some, it's work. I think the big God is ourselves. That's why you need each other. You need to get close enough to your church family to where whatever ingrown dynamics are in your family system, somebody from outside your family system can say, hey, Al, or whatever your name is, Do you know how you came across to that person? That's the benefit of the big family, is that we end up, the church is the best way to save family systems from inbreeding, and I'm speaking metaphorically. And when you don't have a close church, it doesn't happen. Every person I've met in my life with which I've any measure of closeness has shaped me. And hopefully I'm humble enough to see where I could receive something from them. And hopefully they've received something from me. So it's loving everybody but God is super easy to do, but it's usually twisted around how I want to do things. Learning to love God sets me free to really love, and then I get the real thing. It's the difference between love and lust. They're very similar in many of their manifestations, but they're very different in their motivations. And this is at the heart of growing. Over here.
Yeah, I retired from the Oregon Conference as a pastor 10 years ago.
No, thank you.
And when we first arrived there in 2012, the president of the Oregon Conference said, we have 7 multi-million-dollar sex abuse lawsuits going.
Yeah.
Because Oregon had no statute of limitation.
Oh.
And so his statement was, we are asset rich, cash poor. And he told the pastors, he said, if you don't report any case of this, you will be liable for the $10,000 deductible on the liability policy.
Okay.
So anyway, there's the whole issue of salaries and compensation and remuneration and those different things. It's a touchy issue. But during the General Conference, I've been watching, some of you have heard of this guy, Brother Lawrence. I don't know who he is, exactly who he is.
Pleasant commentator out there.
But I like to read the comment section because it's very telling. And I was reading this. This comes from salary.com. And it says, based on our data, it appears that the optimal compensation range for a president of Southwestern Union Conference of Adventists is between $517,000 and $867,000 a year, with the average salary of $680,000. Have you ever heard of this before?
What system is that in?
It says salary.com.
And is it for the church?
It says the Southwestern Union Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, the president. So I did a little checking here. Let me see if I can pull it up, back up. I asked ChatGPT. Okay. And they say, let me go back to the beginning here because I think it's interesting. This is in light of the whole tithe issue. The image shows a claimed salary range for the president of Southwestern Union Conference and I said the numbers there. However, this does not appear to be accurate for the following reasons. Is the Adventist salary structure, including its unions, conferences, uses a standardized wage scale for its employees, including administrators. These are not for profit, and religious and executive compensation is far lower than that of corporate CEOs or similar secular. Typical union conference president in the U.S. makes somewhere in the low 6 figures or less, often tied to the denominational wage factor, which varies by region and cost of living, benefits, and so on. So I know when I pastored, they had this thing called 150% remuneration factor, depending on how many years you had served. And I think my ending salary there was probably close to $50,000 a year. I never heard of this kind of figures here.
I don't think those figures are accurate. The president in the Michigan Conference may make 5 or 10% more than the pastors. I think my salary when I ended was $62,000. Mm-hmm. So no pastor's getting rich, and I don't think the administrators have their hands in the till. One of the issues that came up in the General Conference was administrators getting paid to serve on boards for ADRA. That's right. And I think that needs to be examined and fixed but I don't think the administrators the union probably makes maybe 5 or 10% more than the conference, but they've tried to hold them to where we don't work for money. So I think somebody's off on that. Yeah. That's my opinion.
Well, the issue that you brought up about the ADRA salaries, U.S. aid, I assume that's where that's coming from, NGOs, they were saying that Ted Wilson was in $120,000 a year. I assume that's over and above his tithe-paid salary. And then Ayrton Cooler is like $150,000.
Yeah, you can get online and look at the ADRA 990. If anybody wants to do it, Google ADRA 990 2023. And you can look, nonprofits are required to report. ADRA has to report, the General Conference has to report.
Yeah.
And it'll show you compensation for the top 10 or whatever amount of employees they have. And the challenge is that some of our presidents are living in very expensive places. Some of them are making, if you want to put 5 or 10% more on, I'm no expert on the finances of the church. I've sat on a lot of committees. But it wouldn't surprise me if the General Conference president's making around $100,000 a year. It appeared by my reading of the 990s that some of them were getting more than what we might consider reasonable honorarium for sitting on the board of ADRA. The problem is, it doesn't appear that there's really any forum to talk about this. I do think that people like Brother Lawrence and James DeValian with Adventist Media Connect and some of these people have created a necessary discussion. If we can do it without being negative, it needs to be done. That's my sense. But our denominational employees, including our presidents, they're not making, everybody's working, at least most everybody's working for a missionary wage. That's my
Do you
opinion.
think that the wage scale issue is driving some of the blindness about your situation?
In what way? What are you thinking of?
Well, I don't know. With President Jim Mitchell, could you be threatening the wage scale in some way by talking about these things and opening up the door?
The truth is, I didn't talk about much of any of this. I was very careful about what I said when I preached. Mm-hmm. On September 21 of last year, which was the Sabbath Conrad got banned, I preached a sermon called Crucial Conversations. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to go back and watch it. Mm-hmm. In that sermon, in the last 10 minutes, I went back and forth very nicely between Conrad and the General Conference, and I said, it's probably not helpful. It was a very nice rebuke to both sides. I respect both sides. I'm personal friends with Conrad, but my friendships, you don't get a pass just because we're friends. Mm-hmm. My friendships are oriented around the principle of Christ first and the principles of obeying him and, in this case, being good leaders. In that sermon, I nicely challenged him to be careful how he said things, and I nicely challenged the General Conference not to be banning and blacklisting and de-delegatizing people, etc. That's as direct as I think I ever got with the denomination. During COVID, I preached a sermon called, I think it was called Cowardice and Courage at the End or something like that. That sermon went viral. But I didn't name anybody. I didn't call anybody out. The Bible says, let him who have ears hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And so I believe that my releasing was a function of strong disagreement behind the scenes about how Conrad had been processed. The banning. I'm still hoping for a better outcome. I don't know if or when it'll happen. I love the church. But I don't think I was released over any of these peripheral issues. I think in the end, the strength of my disagreement over how this was being carried out was the straw that broke the camel's back. And, in the first 2 minutes of Ayrton Kohler's message last Sabbath, he said, we are a family. And he said it more than once. In a family, you go the extra mile. You attempt to redeem. You hold people accountable. I was let go on the basis of at-will employment law for being a bully, insubordination, and fomenting dissent against the conference. I don't believe I did any of those things, but obviously enough people were convinced I did that they let me go. So we're stuck, because if you're going to have the courage of a prophet and a prophetic role in your church, sometimes that prophetic role, like in the Old Testament, like in the New, is going to be focused. Ellen White says the church has problems. And feeble and defective as she may be, this is Testimony to Ministers, page 49, needing to be rebuked and reproved. Well, who's going to do it? If your preachers don't have enough courage to do it, woe be unto everybody else. At this point in time, I'm convinced the lay people are going to have to show the nobility, the kindness, and the courage to stand up and speak. You get enough people speaking to leaders who can't be ignored. Remember, I told you in the first service, make it hard for them not to listen to you. Carry yourself with appreciation, prayerful gratitude for their service, even though you don't agree with everything. And then nicely tell them what you really believe and show them why, briefly. Don't use a lot of their time, and let it be. I've practiced these things. Right now, I believe that the situation with me is a shake-up before there's a shake-out. And that's where I'm at.
I mention it because as a pastor, my first district, I had 3 churches like you did in New York. The New York conference is hurting right now. They keep adding more and more churches to the pastors.
The churches are dying.
In the Oregon conference, the last district I served, partly, and I'll use the word, the previous conference president's malfeasance with the operation of money put them in like $1.5 million debt. And so they added 2 more churches to the district I served. And Russell Burrell and his revolution of the church, unleashing the awesome power of lay ministry, he says we got too used to having settled pastors in our churches, and there should be more lay ministry work. But that's really not the case right now. Most of the churches, maybe they tend to be pastor dependent, and then pastors put on more. But when you try to manage 5 different churches, do prayer meetings,
you're not too settled when you have five churches.
It's unbelievable. Anyway, that's just the challenge. I'm speaking for the buck private pastors that are struggling in some of these districts, while these guys upstairs are getting these 6-figure incomes. I have a problem with that.
Well, I don't know much about Oregon, but I will tell you this. The laws that govern renewal are spiritual and relational. And while you cannot formalize renewal, you should not, just like if you have a failing basketball team and they don't know how to dribble, you should teach them how to dribble. So there are fundamentals of church growth that cannot be violated. And then there's the Spirit coming in to bring life. If we can get back to those 2 things, we'll see life. And my testimony is in 37 years. Every time I tried not to turn from the left to the right, this is Joshua 1. I pray this prayer regularly. Lord, make me a Joshua 1 man. This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth. Meditate on it day and night. Don't turn to the left or the right. Nobody will be able to stand against you. Everywhere your foot treads will be yours, and everything you do will prosper. And if you go to Deuteronomy 28, it says your enemies will rise up in front of you one way, and they'll be scattered 7. I'll chase you down to bless your bread bowl, bless your barns, bless your kids. Bless, 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 bless. That's the first 14 verses. And the last 60 verses are about how God's going to curse us if we turn away, because he's not going to make it easy to damn ourselves. Are we willing to humble ourselves and pray? God's willing to come down and start the fire. All right, over here.
Do you think Satan is attacking the spirit of prophecy now from the top down?
I want to be careful how I answer this. The prophetic role is not one that's easy to appreciate, period. Some people have used the spirit of prophecy the wrong way. For Beulah, to tell Johnny, you really need to quit smoking, she can get away with it because she had a relationship. But to go around telling everybody Ellen White says not to do this makes people hate Ellen White. Morris Venden covered this in one of his books, where he said when he was raising his boys, I didn't tell them Ellen White said so. He said, I told them that I said so. Amen. And that's where there's a relational bond. There's no way that there can't be an ever-growing resistance to the writings of Ellen White, because it's one of the two identifying marks of the remnant church. To say it's systematized in the system, no, I don't want to say that, and I really don't want to say as much. I will say this, there is an academic movement right now to downgrade her writings from authoritative, when she's commenting on the Bible, like in the Conflict of Ages series, to just being another commentator, or slightly above that. So in that sense, I think there is an attack on it. I think many of our administrators still believe. There are some that don't. But I do think, especially at the General Conference level, most of them still do.
Does the leaders have authority over the brethren?
Are you talking about the people like in conference and union and division over the pastors or over the people, the members?
Pastors, leaders, conference presidents?
Well, the Bible's very clear. In Hebrews 3 times, last chapter, I think it's chapter 13, Paul says, greet an overseer. Rise up. Don't cause those that are overseeing you trouble. Paul will write that a good elder is worthy of double honor. At some level, there is spiritual authority that they have. Of course, unchecked, it's just abuse. We all are brethren and sisters. So yeah, they have some spiritual authority, but it's a church. People are going to do what they want. If they're not subject to Christ, they're not going to recognize the authority in an elder or a pastor. But there is some authority there for sure.
I think when it's according to God's word and the spirit of prophecy. But
exactly.
Can I read a quote that this is what I'm seeing more and more in our church, right? Rules and restrictions. There is an evil, a great evil that is to be rooted out of our council meetings and board meetings. We are living in perilous times. Men are striving for the control over their fellow men. God is displeased and dishonored. Man is led to fear man rather than God. My brethren, has not the word of God been dismissed from your councils? Have not the words of men had too much power? Has not religious freedom been excluded from your assemblies? Have you not censored your fellow men when you yourselves were standing under the censor of God? Take your hands off your brethren. They are not to be under the control of any man or set of men. Men are not to league together to bind their fellow men by rules and restrictions. God knows the character of men. He sees their weaknesses, and he has not put into their hands the power that belongs alone to him. He has not given them the right to say what their fellow men shall do or what they shall not do.
Yeah. Where would we be without the prophet? She spent the first 5 decades of her ministry building up the church, and a large part of the last 2 or 3 safeguarding it from its own imbalances. She's got a lot to say to conference presidents. Over here and in the back. We'll go to the back first. The microphone's there. Yep.
Basically, I have 2 questions, short, sweet, and to the point. First one is 503C1. Do you think it stifles the pastors when they're doing sermons? That's number 1. And number 2, are we in contract as the Adventist hierarchy contracted with the World Health Organization and the United Nations?
Well, I never found being a recognized nonprofit, which is a 501c3, to stifle me. Potentially, I mean, one of the limitations on a pastor is they're not to directly affirm or critique a political person, especially while they're running for office, because ideally, or in philosophy, a 501c3 is set aside for non-political methods and non-political organizations. I never found it to be a problem. I think all the moral ground we needed to cover, we could show on a moral ground we needed to cover. As for influence, I would put it in the phrase of influence coming from the United Nations and the money coming through USAID. I do think there is a serious need to look and see if that is negatively affecting what we're doing. And what I don't think is healthy for the church is for people to get up and say, nobody from the United Nations is telling us what to do. Well, okay, we never really thought they were anyway. But is our relationship with them putting orthodontic pressure? Do you get the idea? Is it putting orthodontic pressure on our identity and our mission that's not good for it? And I think that's the question. And I really do believe the last GC session and the run-up is requiring those discussions to at least be heard in the beginning, whether they go any farther than that or not. So I have a sense in my own mind that you can't receive lots and lots of money and favor from the government and not kind of factor that into some of your decision making. It's an opinion. I'm not here to excoriate. My guess is that when we entered into those relationships, we thought they would be good and advance the cause. But somewhere along the line, it's like that train I talked about. When it started picking up speed and you sensed it was going off in a wrong direction, we probably needed to be having discussions. Well, we're having them now. So, yep, back over. And then we had a question down here in the front, too.
My question is, with the recent apology at the GC session regarding the statements, do we think that there was some sort of a vindication that took place there in the sense that we do have an issue with these statements because what was voted was not what has been up on the website for the last 10 years, which has caused significant trouble? So was there some sort of vindication that there needs to a discussion needs to be had? That's number one. And then number two, how do we overcome the disconnect where members can see clearly there's some issues in the church that needs to be addressed, but somehow at the leadership level there doesn't seem to be that level of awareness?
Well, I do think, excuse me, that in this last GC session, discussions that were completely stifled 3 years ago have made it into the culture of discussion, and I consider that very important. In my first message this morning, I entitled it, basically, Why Nobody's Listening. When you get on one of these sites and you type in a comment, type a comment that's Christian, because what happens with some of these leaders, they go to Brother Lawrence's site or AMC, and they see some of these comments that are just, they're not Christian. And then they can just kind of sweep the whole discussion off to the side. So when you see one of those comments, respond to it. Show the watching institutional world that most of the people at this site are fair-minded, reasonable Christians. I watched one of the videos from the General Conference this morning, and the idea that I got from watching the video was that the whole social media thing was corrupted. Well, that would be like saying the books that rolled off the Gutenberg press were corrupted. It's just a new venue. It's just a new dialogue spot. And some of what's there is corrupted, and some of it's where a lot of people are at saying, why aren't you listening? So that's that. What was the second question?
How do we overcome that disconnect?
Well, I think it's being overcome. When Artur Stella, I think it was on Sunday, announced that these statements were going to be looked at by the officers, that is a huge paradigm shift. They should have been looked at years before. And I want to say this very respectfully. The idea that that statement was up for 10 years and nobody knew it stretches the bounds of credulity for fair-minded people. There were too many people complaining. So either that whole segment was just being ignored and nobody looked, which I find not very good, or lots of other things which I don't want to go off and talk about. I appreciate our leaders, but nobody gets a pass on being a family, which means even if I have to listen to somebody that I don't really feel like I am going to gain a lot from, it's going to churn through a bunch of my time, I have to love that member and spend the time listening to them, and maybe something will lodge in my mind. So I'm afraid for a long time the denomination said the people that see something nefarious in the 2021 affirmation statement, I'm afraid they thought they were just a bunch of redneck conspiratorial Adventists, when in reality, there were lots of people that were in the base of deep support for the General Conference who said, we've got to talk. This is not okay. I think there was a colossal miscalculation, and I think some of the events of the first part of the General Conference session reveal that there is some movement. And I suspect there will be movement. You know, I did not say it in my sermon on unity. You cannot just paint with the broad strokes of mission, mission, mission and think that's going to create all the unity. I'm a mission-minded pastor. My church was exceptionally mission-minded. But I solved the problems managerially and administratively in the power of the Holy Spirit that allowed us not to be chafing. And it was that chafing over the last 5 years that created a lot of the problems that just keep coming up. They came up in this session. So let's pray for the new leaders, that they don't choose to look at the people who have concerns as just conspiratorialist critics. All right? Right here. We need a mic up here, too. She's been waiting. Go ahead. We'll do yours.
Ellen White is very clear the ship is not going to sink.
Say that again?
Ellen White is very clear that the ship is not going to sink.
Yeah.
Is the ship the organization? And if yes, then what's your prophetic understanding about the way the church is going to become united?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking.
Yes, if the organization, so the church is not going to sink, they somehow need to become united because Ellen White is presenting that. But at this point, we are polarized and not just liberal and conservative mandates, moral issues, and how are we going to see this unity?
I have a one-word answer for how it's going to be fixed. The shaking. And we're going to be surprised because there are people that we think are on the wrong side, but they're people of principle. And when it becomes clear, us or them are going to keep moving with the truth. So, as for the organization, my feeling is if you're going into war, it'd be nice to have a battleship that can shoot a bomb 30 miles. PT boats are nice, but they're made out of plywood, at least they used to be. So I'd like to have the organization as long as we can have it. There will always be some organization, but it won't be the organization we know now. That's going to be attacked. Revelation's clear on that. You can't get to where you can't buy or sell and still have an organization that's sending people paychecks to buy and sell. So the organization's going to go a lot more cellular. Until it goes cellular, we need to be having the discussions and trying to make it work to achieve its maximal ability. But the shaking is going to solve a lot of our problems. And as I said earlier, I'll say it again. What's going on right now is the shake up before there's a shake out. And if you can't maintain a beautiful spirit, if you're not praying for your leaders, if you're not going the extra mile, which Jesus said to do, to try to save the church, even the people that have power and influence, from wounding it. Then probably you're a self-centered Seventh-day Adventist, and I'm not saying you, but there's a lot of very self-centered Seventh-day Adventists out there, and they're going to be shaken out. Ellen White says whole tribes, whole churches are going to go out. Whole tribes are going to come in. I don't want to be shaken out. I'd rather be shaken up right now. The shaking's going to do a lot, and it'll be terrible. It'll be sad, because some of the people we thought were true, she says, where it looked like a floor of wheat, it's going to be only chaff. We better be humble people. I don't want to be chaff. It's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. All right, over here.
So I am a former PK of a Sunday pastor.
Yeah.
And I joined this church because the man that I was going to marry, Rick Shorter, took his stand first. Mm-hmm. And I said, if I find one thing wrong, I'm out of here.
All right.
That was over 50 years ago. So what converted me, Pastor Kelly, was reading The Great Controversy. Mm-hmm. And that book, after I read it, I said, I'm going to read everything that woman has wrote.
Right.
But the more I read about Ellen White and what was in the testimonies, the Conflict of the Ages series, the selected messages, et cetera, the more I felt removed from the body of Seventh-day Adventists. So my statement first is this. I have found that people that come in from the outside are more willing to accept Ellen White and to stand and to be true to the principles that are there, which are exactly the same thing that is in the Bible. Now, I've also found that every problem we have personally, when I had a problem with my husband, I'd pick up Adventist Home. When I had a problem with my children, I'd pick up Child Guidance. I was working on my master's degree when I became a Seventh-day Adventist. I found 4 books of education, and I decided I didn't need that, the world's education. I needed God's education. And I was on a full scholarship. I dropped out of NYU, New York University. Now, my question to you is this. What can you say? By the way, before I say that, I believe that all the problems the church has and all the problems the individuals have can be solved by reading the answers that are right there in the spirit of prophecy. So, what would you say to encourage people, individuals, and pastors to just read the spirit of prophecy? It's so plain and it's so direct that all of our interpersonal, interrelational with our churches would be solved if we just read it.
Well,
what can you say to encourage the people?
Well, 2 things I think I'd say. Number 1 is read first the Conflict of the Ages series and Steps to Christ. Another thing I'd encourage you to look at is the History of Ellen White by Arthur White in the 6 volumes. Get to know Ellen White as a person. We helped do in, if I was only a disciplinarian in my home, my kids would not love me. When I was a younger man and had these 3 boys, I'd wrestle with them. I could hold them all down at once. Then they got bigger, and I could hold one of them down at once. Then they got big enough to where they could whoop me, and I said, when you're big enough to whoop me, don't whoop me. Somehow, we've resorted to the authority, and I mentioned this earlier. What we need to do is bring the wisdom that Ellen White brought to the life problems you're talking about. Just like the story I told about the music. There's a way to go in there and smash everything. And there's a way to go in there with the skill of a surgeon and a little anesthesia and solve the problem. She lifts up the love of God so much, but she doesn't leave behind the principles and the precepts of how to live. What's Hosea say? My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. As Dwight Nelson said, we shouldn't call them the little red books. We should call them the unread books. There's no reason nowadays that you can't make yourself acquainted with what's in there. Will it lay some convictions on you? Sometimes, yes. I do think in things like counsels on diets and foods, it's an intense serving of lifestyle change in a very little volume. And I think most growing that lasts a long time takes a little bit of time. Ellen White says, to further your point, that when Elisha died, now this is what, 30 years after Elijah, maybe more? The Reformation was not over. So what am I nicely saying? If we could have a little love and discretion about how to use what's in those books, and we were reading them, a large part of our problems would go away. How to apply them? That's going to take some wisdom. But not knowing what they say, that leaves us walking in the dark. Adventism was strong for the first, 60 years, because they didn't doubt the prophet. In the last 60 years, we think we're smarter. We're stuck. Can we humble ourselves? I'm not planning to be stuck. I don't want to be the chaff. But I will say this. I've built my ministry on the sense that there's no theologian like Ellen White. And I'm not going to quote Max Lucado and A.W. Tozer and everybody else and not quote her. She just expands my understanding. Great question. Let's read them and apply them. Listen, while you're doing the dishes, get the LNG White app and start through a book. You'll be through it in no time. All right, where are we going? Over here, and then we'll come down here. Yep.
Hi, thanks again for being here. I'm traveling out here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah. There's a lot of content on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, evaluating how our church is doing, and especially how our church leadership is doing. And some of that content, it's evaluating objective things. Sometimes it boils over into speculation and assumptions. But we're, as a people, we're here in view of all that and trying to put pieces together and attempt to evaluate things for ourselves. How would you suggest, as people wade through the information and the different outlets, how would you suggest we avoid adopting a critical spirit, a spirit of criticism and skepticism, and keep our heart grounded in solely an interest for making Christ known out of our church?
Great question. Number one, limit your exposure. There's only so many times you need to be on the internet looking at something. Come up with a rule. For every 10 minutes I listen to something that's by a regular old person, there's 10 minutes I'm going to listen to the spirit of prophecy. Okay? So limit yourself. Number two, give the leaders the benefit of the doubt. Number three, tell your leaders that they can't stonewall and refuse to talk. Put the discussion on the table somewhere. When Jonathan Zirkle stood up in 2023, they didn't want to talk about it. But what would have been good is if they would have said, we're scheduling a meeting for individuals that want to talk about it. That's never happened. And consequentially, it's a pressure cooker that just keeps building up pressure. Now, you know how pressure cookers work. Eventually, the little seal blows out, and it blows everything in the cooker all over your ceiling. If the pressure gets too high. Ideally, it can't because of the little weight. Give them the benefit of the doubt, only watch so much, and then call up your conference president, have a discussion. Talk with your pastor, your elder. You don't want to get drug into... Look, the General Conference was a place where some of this could have been talked about. Just like your conference constituency or a board meeting or a business meeting. Have reasonable discussions where you're supposed to have them. Bad thing is there were 2,800 delegates to the General Conference. About 800 of them appears didn't get their visas to show up. So 2,000 people were voting. Several very brave women went to the floor and tried to get the agenda opened up. Those people are way up on my list of respectables. They were respectable. That's probably what I think I'd say. Now, walk with Jesus. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. That's the law, right? Right here.
Ron, a friend living close by here, wasn't able to be here, but he's watching online. He had a question for you. He said, why are the pastors and members not reading and speaking more about Bible prophecy? They seem to be sleeping.
I think we've become a little embarrassed of our eschatology, which is the application of Bible prophecy for predicting end-time events. The last pope was very charismatic. And if any of you have ever given a Bible prophecy seminar where you identify the beast of Revelation 13 and the little horn of Daniel, I've been in moments where some very staunch Catholics have been pretty upset with me. I think right now we live in a world of public relations and very shallow affiliations, and the rugged capacity to seek out truth doesn't exist in the culture, and I don't think we're immune from it. Now, the key is going to be to prayerfully, carefully try to define these things without being abrasive unnecessarily. I thought, was it Sean Boonstra or John Bradshaw? I can't remember who it was, did a very good job when they talked about the church of the Dark Ages. I thought that was a tasteful way. It helps when your family has a Catholic background, but pretty soon we're going to see the old Catholic Church in the ascendancy, but the worst part is going to be the Protestants. In this country, it'll be the Protestants that push it. So I think we're not, and I want to be careful, I don't want to speak with too broad of strokes, but I get the sense that in some places, we're a little bit chagrined. And there have been some high-powered seminary professors, at least one that I know of, that's basically said, Ellen White's version of the Great Controversy is contextualized to her day. That's not true. It's wrong. It's a repudiation of our two fundamental pillars of the remnant, which is the spirit of the prophets and our understanding of her in the development. So I think it'll be up to the local congregations to kind of change that with their pastors and teachers.
I had a separate question that personally I wanted to address, and that is, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but at this General Conference session, supplemental amendments to the church manual were voted on by divisions. It was brought to my attention that in 2024, the ADCOM Committee for the South Pacific Union compiled an over 100-page document to make amendments now that were being voted on at this session, and it was supposed to be voted on. I don't know if it passed or not because I haven't seen anything written about it. But in that amendment, verbal language was given to adopt Sunday keeping as an official statement of the General Conference to be adopted by the Tonga and Samoa Islands as regard to worship. For about 100 years, because of national Sunday laws, in Tonga and Samoa, the General Conference adopted Sunday as the same day of worship that our Catholic brethren and other denominations worship on the same day.
Yeah.
I see that there's a potential problem here, and this has been brought up at the local level, it's been brought up at the division level, and it's been brought to Ted Wilson's administration and his desk, and they keep passing the buck from one person back to the next. If these amendments that are being projected to be adopted at this General Conference, including the ones regarding LGBT language to now also be included, is now formally adopted by our General Conference, how can we claim and proclaim the three angels' message to come out of Babylon when we're worshiping on the same day and advocating that as we worship our churches in these divisions are worshiping on the same day as the Sunday churches.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the addendums you're talking about. So I think what should happen is that if you could verify through, some kind of referencing that this is an actual reality. It sounds unique to me. It doesn't sound like something that I would think is going on. I have found a number of our Samoan and Tongan brothers to be some of the more fervent, faith-based folks out there. So I don't know much about that. And what I would say is that the LGBTQI, and there's lots of other letters to go in the acronym, we need to be unembarrassed about the beauty of the family. We need to have beautiful families. And we need to show beauty to people that are coming out of or desiring to know something different and better. I would say there's a battle on. The devil is trying to convince the church that somehow the Bible doesn't have any experience or any relevance for addressing those issues. It does. But I would hope that this church, if someone came in that looked like they were part of the LGBT community, would embrace them, love on them. You might not make them a member until they change their beliefs, but they ought to know that coming here is where you meet the most loving people in the world who aren't confused about their identity and aren't out to condemn you. So I'm cautious about this phenomena. It was published in Adventist Today and other places. Was it? Okay, I can't say much intelligently about it. I will say this: the Australian Union was the only union going into the General Conference session that spoke up and said, we'd like this statement looked at. So, and all of the Australians, if there's two countries in the world that are appreciative of Conrad Vine and myself, it's Canadians and Australians. Because those two countries seem to not know what to do with democracy in the midst of the mandates. So I'm hoping that Adventist Today has got something twisted, but if you don't mind, send me something on that and I'll look at it. I do believe most of our division leaders and union leaders still believe in the biblical structure of the family. So I do want to say that. And then Elder Finley brought up something in a video he produced last September. The church in apostasy versus apostasy in the church. They are two different phenomena. So let's try to lovingly confront apostasy in the church without giving over to the idea that the whole place is in trouble. But if you don't mind, if you'd send me some of that documentation, I'd be curious to look at it. All right, we got one over here, Janelle. Well, thank you, Lee, and thank you, Gwen. I know some of you by name.
In your opinion, how should we respond to the comment that's circulating by Ellen White that the Apocrypha is the hidden book and the wise of the last days will study and understand it?
Someone says she says that?
Yeah.
Does she say it? That sounds off to me.
Did she say, he's asking, she say that?
Yeah, that's a quote from her.
I've never seen it. I'd be curious to see it, but I would say this. The Apocrypha would be another uninspired source of information that we could glean some things from. Personally, I think our Jewish brothers and sisters have certain things that we could learn from them. But I think there's a special work for us to do for them. So maybe familiarizing ourselves with the Apocrypha is part of an evangelistic dynamic for reaching them too. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that statement. Thank you for asking. I'm learning some things while I'm sitting here.
Question, did you hear me now?
Yeah.
Questions that I have you when you talk about unity.
Yeah.
How do you come into unity when there's so many methods of interpretation of the Bible? The spirit of prophecy says that those who are given the three angels' message will be using the rules of interpretation given by Father Miller.
Yeah.
And yet you've got historical, critical, historical, biblical, historical, all these different terminologies that are out there that are tossed at people like yourself and Andrews and so forth. So how do you come up to say, William Miller's rules is 14 simple rules to follow the Bible?
Yeah.
Why can't we come under the unity of that instead of all these other methods?
Well, the problem with any institution that emphasizes education is that at some level, that emphasis on education may actually war against the elemental learning that comes with a group of farmers and, I don't know what everybody was, printers and everybody else. None of them had education that's formal. Strangely enough, when Jesus picked his disciples, he got into the same group. So it's the character of a man or a woman that is the keystone for understanding. Life is the ultimate educator. Now, there's people in this room who have lots of education. If that education is subject to inspiration, your education is nothing but a valuable tool. What I've tried to remind people lately is the Bible's inspired, the spirit of prophecy is inspired, and everything else is an opinion. And we're going to have to allow that peer-reviewed science, whether it's literature or philosophy or theology, there's going to have to be some kind of arbiter, because you may have an IQ that's off the chart, and you might have 4 postdoctorate degrees. But that doesn't mean you're an honest person for interpreting what the Bible says, and you can twist it with more subtlety than anybody else. Lucifer was the smartest guy in heaven except God. Look what he did. I'm for education. I have a doctoral degree. But all along the way, I tested everything by the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. To answer your question, there will never be unity with some. You know what the good news is? Most of the people gathered here that go to church here can come into a blessed, bonded, unified approach to life and hopefully walk through the pearly gates someday with assistance from each other. There's not going to be unity everywhere. And sometimes people leave your church because of what you believe. Adventist. And being in Berrien Springs, I was worried about that. I came to Berrien Springs thinking, what's the vision of the village church? I got to Berrien Springs and I found out everybody needs a pastor, everybody's a human being, and there's a lot of people who don't know what we believe in Berrien Springs, and there's a lot of other people who don't know what we believe too. As for unity, I'd like to have it. Remember, the Bible says, as far as it's in your power, live at peace with all men. Sometimes you can't. Right now, there's not a lot of unity surrounding me. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go out and somehow contort myself into a unifying dynamic? GYC happened right after I got fired. And I had somebody text me. It was almost a plea to get online and settle all this down. The problem was, I couldn't. Because when you don't process it right, it's not, it would be like a woman that was getting beat up by her husband, and somebody said to her, could you please encourage him to stop beating? Could you please get up and say something about him? Now, I don't want that metaphor to go too far. But I texted the person back, and they're a friend of mine. And I said, until you know more about the situation, you should probably ask more questions. I wish there could be unity everywhere. The honest people are going to come into unity. There are some honest people that aren't going to come into unity until the very end because they honestly believe something different. All right, how long do you want to go, Soren? You want to go till 4, or what do you want to do? I don't want to keep anybody. Let's go a little longer, and then obviously if somebody needs to leave, please don't feel like you're being disrespectful to me or the church or whatever to go. I'm willing to keep talking for a while, but I don't want people to feel captive on a beautiful Sandpoint Sabbath, all right?
Several questions I had. One is, I understand there were 2 conferences that wrote letters to the General Conference saying that the position that they were promoting about COVID, they felt threatened some people's religious liberty.
Yeah.
And one of those conferences is where our daughter is a teacher at Wichita Hills Academy and college, and they have both, I think they've been supported by that conference, but they seem to have been very disconnected from other conferences and higher up. They used to have lots of students. Now they had like 2 college students last year and just a few academy students. They have a beautiful campus, but if for some reason what you're playing doesn't work out, you should go down there. But I think you'd draw lots of people to that school. The other question is Ben Carson, I've seen him twice say that he doesn't believe in separation of church and state. And also, President Trump also said that at least twice, and then Trump asked him to be head of their committee on that subject. And I'm wondering, could you possibly have some influence on him? Does he not know some of these things? He doesn't sound like he ever went to any of our schools. Maybe he just doesn't know about some of these things. I'm not sure, but he seems like a very earnest, sincere person. The other thing is, Netanyahu was told by 3 leading rabbis for the last 30 years, the leading rabbis, that you will be the last prime minister of Israel and Messiah will return. And he actually showed Mike Pompeo an unveiling of the temple that is to be rebuilt on the Temple Mount. I actually saw the video where he did the unveiling showing him that they were going to do that. Anyway, those things, if you care to comment on any of those things.
Appreciated Dr. Carson standing up for religious liberty during COVID. I've not heard him say that, but I'm not doubting that you're accurate. Separation of church and state comes out of what Ellen White calls that grand old document. And we can go into the dark ages quite rapidly if we forget the Protestant ethic that separates powers. The conferences that stood up, I'm familiar with that school in Utah. I've been there. Very beautiful campus. We had a comment on settled pastors earlier, and my genuine response to settled pastors is that I think what Ellen White didn't want, and this does tie into what you're saying, she didn't want the church just settling down and taking care of its own. So the real issue is leadership. And I don't think we're teaching leadership. My doctorate is in leadership, and the new model of leadership looks like the bad old model of politics where you find out where everybody's going first, and then you facilitate what they want in the name of the group and the Holy Spirit. That is not the Bible method of leadership in the Bible, especially Nehemiah. And usually it's a leader who sparks a new self-awareness and a new purpose and meaning in life. So, was there one more thing you mentioned that I've forgotten? Netanyahu. I do believe there's a general sense that the world is in trouble. I have wondered if there will be a physical, literal temple rebuilt. I tend to think there will be, but I wouldn't bet on it, because I really believe at the heart of dispensationalism, which is that the Jews get another chance, and the nation of Israel is what an Israelite is. It wouldn't surprise me a bit if, in order to give credibility to dispensationalism, a temple is rebuilt. However, that's all bunk. We came back to dispensationalism. Someone brought it up over here. Historical. You got the preterist and you got the futurist. So, they said that 40 years after the establishment of Israel, we would see the secret rapture. Hal Lindsey's late great jigsaw puzzle by Samuel Bakioki. Everybody ought to get a copy of it and read it. It debunks the whole dispensational movement, but most people are ignorant. They go to experts for apocalyptic understanding. They don't study the Bible based on William Miller's hermeneutics, the laws of interpretation. So, as for Benjamin Netanyahu being the last one, it's possible. What I'd like to challenge everybody that hears this to do is say, folks, keep looking to focus more and more of your life into becoming what this church was 160 years ago when it was founded. It's going to be an amazing movement, and it's not going to go from 0 to 300 like a drag car. God's warming up the engines, and he's giving us chances to run with the footmen. All right? Yeah, where are we going? Okay, I've got a microphone back here, and then we'll try to find our way up here.
Keep it real simple. The question I have is, been over to Village Church with the clinic last year, and the unity within the pastors. I don't know why you weren't there, but you were busy. But the unity that was in that church when we did that large clinic, and with the other organizations that we've been involved with and getting to know you, I have a question in regard to not only this church, but individually and collectively. What is your recommendation? Because the unity, and you said part of the answer is obviously Joshua 1 and Deuteronomy 28. What recommendations, individually, what can we do to bring that unity within our church, not as just together, but the unity as the family of God?
Number one, stay for afternoon programs like this. You're going to bounce into somebody coming and going, and you're going to have just a little closer bond. Bonding, bonding, bonding. That is the philosophy of my ministry now. Come to every prayer meeting, come to every work bee, come to every evangelistic meeting. Pray for each other, Ellen White says in the book Steps to Christ, and let the other people you're praying for know it. Go out of your way. Oh, thank you.
And because the different things we've talked about, your encouragement from Cicero after 20 years of being an elder, we worked with him in the field.
Yeah.
Your encouragement was so much because he was so deathly afraid of just going up front. And the way you encouraged them is just something very much more of the sort than him exactly. But dealing with and seeing you're working, it was just very important because obviously for the leadership, it's not only meekness but a vision and to stand.
Yeah. That church, Cicero, was keeping its tithe for 3 weeks before it sent it on to the conference to pay its bills. It's like all kinds of churches. But I will say this, if you'll love the people, you need good leaders. So don't fight with your pastor and the leaders when you're doing nominating committee. Try to work it out to where you get a harmonious nominating committee, because nominating committee is the most delicate, powerful committee there is. Slowly over time, people learn to trust you. You get away with leading better. You can't speed that up. Sometimes God does things. In 1 Kings 18, nobody was listening to Elijah. He said, if the Lord be God, serve him. And if Baal be God, serve him. And what's the Bible say? Nobody answered him a word. At the end of the day, he got down on his knees, and this is what he prayed. Lord, show them that you're God, that I'm your servant, and I've done these things at your command. He was now the new leader of the nation in a fraction of a second. Most of the time, it doesn't work like that. But what happens is, when the leadership team can lead the board and the elders to start praying about what should happen, not seeing how much money's in the bank to decide. Little steps of faith grow into bigger steps of faith and bigger bond. And pretty soon a church that's committed to coming together and doing God's work, and it has mature people that'll help them solve its problem, they become bonded. And I'm simplifying a lot of things. For me as a pastor, I worked many, many hours. And the reason I worked many hours is that when somebody came up to me and interrupted all my necessary work, I understood they were my necessary work. And what was left for me to go do afterwards would just have to be fitted in. When you go the extra mile for each other, Pretty soon it'll become second nature. Pretty soon it'll be the Sandpoint Church of the Second Mile. And once you get there, I mean, you're a nonprofit. You've got commitment. You've got money. Whatever your education levels are and what you can give, those are your main resources. You know the easiest one to fix right away? Commitment. It might be the hardest one to fix right away, but it's the one that doesn't require money. It requires some good leadership. So a lot of patience, a lot of looking to God, but all that stuff grows slowly. I did not want to be at Village for the first 2 years, and in the 11th year, I didn't want to be gone. It got better than I ever imagined because God got to be in charge. He's shepherding his people. And when the church can learn to start looking to God and praying and having peace instead of fighting over that's the best way to spend the money or that's the best way, you'll go places. That's kind of a generic answer. I ought to write a book about it, really, is the bottom line, so that pastors and leaders could sit down and say, well, this worked there, maybe it would work here. Yeah, the vacuum cleaner story. Yep, the vacuum cleaner broke. It's a big, beautiful church, octagon. It'll hold 500 people. And we spent a half hour talking about how to replace the vacuum because we had no money. And after that, I said, I put that much money in the account every month. I'm not going to ask for permission to buy that vacuum cleaner. And I started buying things without checking. Of course, the finances just started taking off, and who wants to argue with that? I was careful. I didn't just run like it was my church. But yeah, you're going to have some leadership. And sometimes the leader is going to challenge other leaders. You know, Dr. Griffin was a successful dentist until he fell off a ladder cleaning his gutter. God was lining him up for a different kind of work. Praise the Lord. All right, let's do a few more, and then we'll...
I just have a quick comment. So we're going to pass the baskets around. So if you guys want to support AMI 365, this money will go directly to AMI 365. So we'll pass those around as we continue to ask questions. We'll also have a basket at the end, and you can go online and donate there.
Yeah, AMI365.org. Thank you. All right, let's go another 10 minutes to 4:15. All right, right here.
Yeah, Pastor Kelly, since you mentioned Canada and Australia, there are quite a few saints from Canada that crossed the line this morning, and I'm probably speaking for 99% of them, if not 100%. It was a real breath of fresh air to watch the Village Church during the COVID times. So even if you hit a few more spiritual speed bumps here, always keep in mind that it was really encouraging to watch it, even though we keep our eyes on Jesus.
Yeah, thank you. Praise the Lord.
Thanks for being used by him.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Coming out here is part of God's anesthesia to some of the pain I feel sometimes. It's like, okay, it made a difference. It wasn't all for naught. Go to the back.
Thank you. Pastor Kelly, we can't thank you and your wife and family enough for what you've done in showing us how to portray a character like Jesus.
Praise the Lord.
All that you have done through this whole situation has proven to us that that's what we need. We need that character. We need what you've shown us. And I just can't thank you both enough, and your children, what they've gone through. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. I'm sure Colleen agrees. When the Village Church stood up in protest about what happened, that did a lot of good for my kids. They kind of figured out that it was a small group that didn't like what I was doing, but most people at least sensed my motives were good, even if they didn't agree with everything. Thank you so much, and praise the Lord. All right.
While we're taking up the offering, I wonder if you would be willing to tell a little bit more about AMI and your vision for the future. I know you did at the beginning, but if you'd care to spend a little more time on that.
One of the most exciting things about AMI is I'm planning to educate doctors, nurses, pastors, and organizers, 4 people, to come out from AMI and have a medical immersion missionary program in churches. Do you have a shower in your church? Is there a shower in this building? I'd encourage you to put 1 or 2 in. Then this very building can be an in-house mission experience where You bring in like John Kelly, who's the founding president of the College of Lifestyle Medicine. Now it's like 13,000 members. It's a legitimate medical specialty. If everything goes as planned, John will be working with us. You bring these lifestyle medicine physicians, nurse anesthetists, you bring a pastor and an organizer to work with your team, and you start planning months in advance to hold an in-house lifestyle reset program in your church. John Kelly was in IT before he went into medicine in his middle life. He's a statistician. He keeps meticulous records. And he made a presentation to the College of Lifestyle Medicine last year. And he said, because he used to work at the Lifestyle Center of America in Hurrah, Oklahoma. He worked at Loma Linda. He said, the clinical results from doing the immersion program in a local church were better than in the retreat centers he had been with. Now, we need retreat centers. But the thing about the local church is this. If they're a fairly healthy family, for 10 days, they share that with the 10 people that come to the immersion program. We have seen people's numbers drop in ways that cannot be explained except radical lifestyle intervention and God. So there's a lot of churches where they're never going to have a retreat center, and you have people here that represent some of those retreat centers. Go for it. I'm building one too. Why? Because this work needs to be in 100 places more than it is already. And one of the things I'd say to all of you, start talking to the Upper Columbia Conference about putting into the policies insurance for our own workers to go be at these places, so everybody's not having to squeeze blood out of a turnip to go to one of them. We believe in these things. We should be funding them for the rebuild of our workers. So, to me, that's one of the most innovative, powerful things. It will be, in my opinion, something like this that revives the work in the cities, bringing the pastors and the doctors back together so that whole gospel is what experienced. At our last immersion program, or our next to the last one, we had 2 non-Adventists. They both started coming to church. They started coming to prayer meeting. One of them then got married, so we ended up with 3. The relationships that were built, the mini gospel prophecy seminar that was given in it, it touched hearts and changed lives. They taste and see that the Lord is good. So we're going to do that. We need to reform education. You folks are blessed to have a school here in this beautiful place. We need to help our system figure out how to integrate as much of a homeschool type experience with nature and everything else, and yet I don't want to make this simple. It's complex. But being married to an educator or won to Christ by an educator, Ellen White says nature in and of itself has the power to subdue the character. You're in a beautiful place. I would encourage you to continue on whatever journey you're on, working with your educators to see if there's not a way to incorporate more and more of God's second book, which was really his first book, into the experience. Those are the big things. You know, we are going to build an event center, and we're going to have all kinds of events there, including religious liberty. I don't know what else is going to develop out of it right now. We'll have a lot of, hopefully, agricultural-based learning. I hope people like yourselves, if you want to come work with a bunch of great-hearted men and women, come help us build it. I hope our students help us build parts of it. And I hope it's a place, if you want to drive a camper or a tent or an RV and stay there when you come to the Midwest, it'll be there as a place. I see it as a gathering spot. I want to be careful what I'm about to say. But the historic, conservative, principled Adventism that made us strong for those first 60 years has been under attack from the world and sometimes from the church. And it's not the General Conference, okay? It's a culture that's grown in where nobody's supposed to rain on my parade, and we're not really supposed to act like family, just good friends. And so don't ever talk to me about something I'm doing, because we're not really family. We're just cultural Adventists, and we're good friends. Right now, if we're going to see a rebirth, we're going to have to see a rebirth of culture. We're going to have to see a revival. All right? Let's do a few more questions and call it good. All right? Right here? Do we have a mic here, or do we have mics somewhere else? All right, we'll do one or two more and call it good. All right, go for it. But the online audience might not hear you. So let's... Thank you. Good to see you too.
Logistically, from what you just brought up, AMI, will there be updates on the website, YouTube channel, whatever, where you're going to have windows, 1 week, 2 week, for people to show up to help work, even though I'm a grunt and I'm not skilled? I can move a few things. Second part of the question is, us older folks, any opportunities for us to attend classes there, or is it primarily for youth?
Come one, come all. Now, we want to do it in an organized fashion, so there'll be some kind of coordination for volunteers. And number two, for classes, I want the classes to be for all people, pastors, administrators, and lay people. And there will be classes that are taught by folks like yourself that have something to come and teach a 1 week intensive. So my hope is that it becomes a great revival I hope it becomes a hub for the culture that made us strong and the commitment to Christ that made us strong. I hope it's a great educational hub. Does that answer your question? All right, thank you. Colleen, you want to say something? Oh, there will be updates.
In the trade school.
Oh yeah, we're going to have a trade school. I have a theory which I shared with the elders last night. I'll share it with you, and maybe this will be it. If a person never learns how to use a shovel or change a tire or put a spark plug in, or what is a circuit, or what is a stud, they are victims of the environment all the time. But you know, my tire went flat just outside of Glacier. The campground host was nice enough, it had a little bit of air to air it back up. The next morning it went flat again, so I put the donut on and I drove down to, not Kalispell, but the city, Columbia Falls. I went into O'Reilly's, I bought a $10 tire plug. I went outside, took the tire off, reamed out the hole, it was in the right spot, stuck the plug in, cut off the extra plug, aired it up, and I'm planning to go many more thousands of miles on that. If I had never watched somebody do it, of course this is the age of YouTube, but still, the kids need to be encouraged. In my video that introduced AMI, more than twice, or at least twice, I said, we're to raise up kids that know how to shape circumstances, not be shaped by them. And our whole society is pitching towards fearful compliance. My hope is, with the trade school, the kids will go out of there knowing all kinds of things. All of our kids should not be professors or teachers or ministers or doctors. Some of them should go out and be plumbers and contractors. Where would we be? And we don't have them. There's a crisis coming. Plus, I was just talking with Glenn, I think it was, and one of you gave him a great controversy when you brought the invoice for doing your insulation work. He read it, and he became an Adventist. This is what our contractors need to be taught to do. And if they can see their businesses as ministries as well as businesses. And by the way, the contractors, when I have a problem at the church, they're the first people I like to go to because they know how to fix things and they solve problems all the time. If they don't solve problems, they go out of business. And I have loved working with them. It seems to me like a lot of people in Idaho know how to do a lot of things. It's good. Our kids should have hand, head, and heart. All right, thank you for spending the time. And Kurt, if you want to tie us off.